Horizon Zero Dawn was one of the defining games of the PlayStation 4 era. It was praised for smart AI, an expansive open world, and it was all done under a new IP. Guerrilla Games, the team behind Horizon Zero Dawn, was already established as a consistent developer powerhouse for PlayStation exclusive games. Before this, they were responsible for developing the Killzone franchise. But now, with Horizon Zero Dawn being released in 2017 and a new generation of consoles approaching, I thought it was the perfect time to gather everything we know about Horizon Zero Dawn 2, or even Horizon 2. As always, all the links to the sources, if still available, will be down in the description below, so be sure to check those out, and let's get right into it. Let's start all the way back in April of 2017. Game Informer interviewed a few of the key team members behind Horizon Zero Dawn at Guerrilla Games, who are Herman Hulst, the managing director, Jean Bart van Beek, the art director for the game, and Matthias de Jong, the game director, and they gave a bunch of early information on where they wanted to take the franchise. The first update came in the form of the weapon wheel and how it could be better optimized in future installments. The question was, quote, there are 8 main weapons in Horizon, but you can only assign 4 to the weapon wheel at a given time. Why limit the player's ability to quickly swap between weapon types? Matthias answered, saying, quote, at some point we had more weapons on the wheel, but the controls got in the way of how quick we wanted the switching process to be. It just got too finicky. We have some ideas on how we can improve weapon/loadout switching, but I can't share anything yet. Now, this interview happened only 6 months past release, and it just shows they were already thinking about ways to better the franchise and their new ideas for UI and just weapon wheels in general moving forward with this series. Moving on, they were also asked about how the series would continue because most of the big questions were answered within the game itself, and it didn't leave too many questions for the players after finishing a playthrough. The exact quote says, quote, many games sacrifice a satisfying conclusion to set up a sequel, but Horizon answers all the big mysteries it sets up. Were you afraid of hamstringing potential future narratives by revealing too much? They responded saying, quote, we didn't want to play it safe and hold things back for some sequel that might never come. We wanted to tell a complete story, and that meant we were obligated to pay off the mysteries we set up. By the time you finish Horizon, you've discovered what happened to the ancient world, the purpose of robots, and why Aloy was shunned since birth, and her true origins. So yeah, if a sequel happens, we can't lean on any of that. I suppose that makes our jobs as writers more challenging, but challenge is good. End quote. And this answer is great. It shows, yes, they still did tease a little bit at Horizon Zero Dawn 1, but that they already knew that they wanted to tell a complete story, and hopefully the series continues in that way in each game while builds on the last is still a complete story and we don't always have to wait for sequels. And the very last question that I want to talk about says, quote, if a sequel does happen, what's the number one thing you would hope to change or expand on? JG responded saying, we've been absolutely humbled by players' responses to the story and their emotional connection to Aloy. Should a sequel happen, our number one goal would be to respect that connection by doing our utmost to create a story that resonates just as deeply. We feel duty-bound to honor the time and emotion that players have invested in Horizon. The last thing we want to do is disappoint the folks who have given the game such passionate support. And another answer from JBVB says, more machines, they are a lot of fun to design, build, animate, and play with. I wish we could have done 100, but reality is a harsh mistress. It doesn't allow you to make hundreds of machines. Now, we get 2 key pieces of information from these answers. One, it doesn't seem like the developers are overtelling Aloy's story. I know this interview happened before the DLC for Horizon Zero Dawn came out, but it seems like they understand the players do feel a connection to her. We spent all this time figuring out her story and understanding her. I don't see them changing all that now for the sake of a sequel. I could be proven wrong, but that's just my 2 cents. And the other is that they definitely want more machines. And hopefully this game is tied to the next generation of consoles at least somewhat, and they are given more freedom to create the game they've always wanted and more processing power and just more memory to make the machines they want. Now, the final piece of this puzzle comes from the game's Radar interview in March of 2018 with Herman Hulst as well. I wanted to touch on the fact that they directly asked if this was the end of Aloy's story, and Hulst responded saying, quote, "She's really uncovered some of the main mysteries of the world. But how do you feel when you finish the story? Are there questions that come up that you want to answer for Aloy? It was not difficult for us to build the Frozen Wilds and tell that story through Aloy. The environments and the world we put together easily raise more questions, so it feels pretty rich to us, but that's all I can say about that for now." And if that wasn't enough to convince you that the sequel will be a continuation of Aloy's story, Hulst continued on in the interview saying, quote, "We obviously couldn't tell the next chapter of the personal journey of Aloy in the DLC, so we went into a side story. But it is a part of the world, a part of the map we wanted to explore. At the beginning of putting the game together, we had drafted the area so we knew it was going to look amazing, as a kind of backdrop for these amazing machines. The tribes themselves and the relationships with the machines was interesting." So once again, this was well after the DLC was released for the game, and it still seems like they're sticking to their guns that Aloy's story can always lead to more questions and they aren't through with her yet. So I wouldn't be surprised if the next game still follows her, and I don't see them moving away from her just yet for this series. Now let's go to mid-2018. In July to be exact, Giles Armstrong announced he is the new senior writer at Guerrilla Games. He's previously worked on Tropico 6 and a World War II game as a freelance writer, and now is working on an unannounced project at Guerrilla Games, which could basically be two options. One is this new Horizon game that we know is being worked on, or the other is we know they're also working on some sort of new multiplayer game as well. Kind of transitioning from there, late 2018, Guerrilla Games started to bulk up its staff in preparation for all their unannounced games. As I said, we can assume one is a Horizon 2, some Horizon Zero Dawn sequel, and two things that I see often associated with Horizon 2 is two hires, Simon LaRoche and Chris Lee. LaRoche was the game director for Rainbow Six Siege and is now the game director for this unannounced title, while Lee also worked on Rainbow Six Siege and was focused on online and multiplayer design, which included social features and matchmaking, which got community members wondering if we will see more social features in Horizon Zero Dawn, or whatever the sequel is called, or possibly even Monster Hunter style raids and fights, where multiple players can work together to hunt bigger machines. Now, Guerrilla Games has since clarified slightly what the future of this franchise will look like, including a multiplayer statement. In another interview with Games Radar, Guerrilla Games co-founder Herman Hulst again had this to say when the ideas of co-op and multiplayer were brought up for the future. He said, quote, "I think some people are very happy when there's a beautiful single-player campaign and story, and that's been the overwhelming majority." Now, that isn't the best quote we could have gotten, but it seems like they will stick to that, and I think all these multiplayer and co-op hires for their studio have just been for, as I said, another multiplayer unannounced game they've been working on. So not everyone they're hiring is going to be working on Horizon 2, it just doesn't make sense. They're a big company, they've always worked on multiple projects, and now is no different. I will also say in this video, I won't be going over a ton of other job postings and employee hires because we aren't 100% sure which project they're exactly working on, if it is this multiplayer game, if it's Horizon 2, or if there's even more projects in development. It's just too hard to tell. They're bulking up their staff too much, but I do think it's worth saying that also in 2018, Guerrilla Games announced they were moving into a new office, which was a precursor to the studio wanting to nearly double its staff. So in July of 2018, it was announced that the studio had 250 permanent employees, but wanted to move up to 400 permanent staff members to create and work on all their projects faster. They said though this expansion will take time and should last them for at least a decade. So that's why I'm saying they've been hiring so many people and working in new people, it's way too hard to know which one is for which project. And our last story of 2018 comes from an interview with the Dutch magazine Parool, where Hulst also gave the first mention of the time frame for this upcoming game. He said, quote, "After Horizon Zero Dawn, we are developing at an accelerated pace. The best talents are now coming to us. Only last month we have hired 9 people. but we also need more space for our sound and motion tracking studios. Growth should make it possible to release A-list games more often. We have been working on Horizon for 6.5 years, which is exceptional, but we want to release games every 2 or 3 years, both new titles and games based on existing titles. First thing I'll say is that this was translated, so there might be some finicky wording, but for the most part, we get the idea. Every 2 to 3 years, they want a new game, and if you remember, I said Horizon 1 was released in 2017, so we should be quickly approaching at least an announcement for Horizon 2. It's not an exact science, but if we look at the month time frame, Horizon was released in February 2017, so 3-year anniversary of the game is coming up in a little under a month, which means an announcement for the game should happen maybe even within this year. Obviously, this all gets more complicated because if this game does become a PS5 launch title, I think we could see an announcement sometime early this year, or maybe even on the anniversary of the first game's release, and then marketing will show more and more of the game leading into hopefully a fall 2020 or early 2021 release with the PS5. And we aren't too sure. We don't know if it's being held back because of that, if they're just taking more time with development, but expect it soon, and I would also expect it tied somewhat to the PS5. Whether it comes to both generations, we just aren't sure yet. Moving forward to 2019 and more recent news, Hania Gavankar, the voice actor behind the character Tatia in the Frozen Wilds DLC, did confirm that a sequel is happening, and her direct quote when asked about it was, quote,
"Thank you for introducing me to Horizon Zero Dawn, because otherwise I never would have played that. So good. And I read your review or saw you online, and I was like, all right, I'll give this game a shot. Oh my god.
It's incredible.
I played it for like
Just
5
wait until
hours.
you see the sequel. You're gonna die.
Really?
I know some secrets. You're gonna die.
Oh. Give me one in the autograph line.
I will.
All right.
It's not big news. We already knew for the most part the franchise was going to continue, but it is nice to hear her enthusiasm and just general enthusiasm from the cast when they're excited to show fans what they've been working on and what they know about this game. It's also cool that the Frozen Wilds will directly tie into the game. And for people that didn't play it, it seems like you probably should at least go back and refresh your memory before you get into this next title. Now let's talk about some of the safe assumptions. First being that the game series will continue to be a PlayStation exclusive and probably won't be on PC either. PlayStation is known to keep their exclusives as exclusive as possible, and after the success of the first Horizon game, I don't see this as being any different. Second is that this probably will be a launch title for the PS5. Guerrilla Games previously developed Killzone Shadowfall as a launch title for the PS4 while still developing Horizon, and while Killzone was still deemed a commercial and critical success in terms of sales, Horizon blew the game out of the water. So it makes more sense to develop a Horizon game as a launch title or another new IP rather than Killzone. And Killzone could still come, but just possibly later down the life cycle of the PS5. There is one last story I want to cover, which is going to be what to expect from the story in Horizon Zero Dawn 2, but there is one last thing I want to cover before that, which comes from friend of the channel JorRaptor. I'll link his channel and original video down below. But it started with Darren, who's a principal animator at Guerrilla Games. He made a tweet of 2 pictures outside and inside of Goodbye Kansas, who are known for making cinematic trailers and have done so for a lot of high-profile games like Cyberpunk 2077, Ghost Recon Wildlands, Mass Effect, Dragon Age, and so many more. The tweet has since been deleted, but it seems to imply that a trailer for the Horizon Zero Dawn sequel has been worked on and is definitely, hopefully, being saved for a reveal event sometime in the future, and it definitely will be high quality from all the work we can see that this Kansas studio has worked on in the past. Now with that out of the way, let's close out talking about where this game's story will go. In the base version of the game, it ends with Aloy thinking she has destroyed Hades and activates the virus purge and is able to deactivate corrupted machines. However, in the post-credit scene, we see that Hades is captured by Sylens, who is still driven by his need for knowledge and wants answers. It's safe to assume we will travel to new areas in the sequel, possibly done in necessity to track down Sylens before he can release Hades again. And fans are also holding out hope that we can finally fight one of the Metal Devils, or Horuses, or a Titan. In the game, we kind of get partial looks at the machines, but over on ArtStation, the assets art director at Guerrilla Games, Alex Zapata, released some amazing images that show the Horus Titan war machine. It looks really, really cool, and I would say we will definitely have some interaction with it in the next game. Now, there are a ton of alleged leaks out there, but I wanted to keep this video pretty safe and only confirmed information. Let me know, I might make a separate leaks or rumors focused video if you guys want that. But that's where we get to the end of this video. Make sure to like and share, subscribe for weekly gaming news, and I will see you guys in the next one.